Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the eTrailer trailer hitch receiver on a 2021 Jeep Wrangler 4xe. Wranglers are one of the most accessorized vehicles, and there's tons of different ways to make it your own, and they're also synonymous with going on adventures, and being able to add some real estate to the back of your Jeep is really going to open up what you can do on those said adventures, whether it be a bike rack, cargo carrier, or pulling a trailer. And the eTrailer trailer hitch receiver is a great way to accomplish that. And this is what your hitch is going to look like when it's installed. eTrailer has a specific matte black powder coat finish, which is really nice looking, but also it holds up to chips and scratches long term. You can see it blends in with the rear bumper. So an overall really good look. And the receiver is going to be a 2" by 2", which is the standard size when it comes to trailer hitch receivers. So that means you're going to have tons of options when it comes to bike racks, cargo carriers, or even ball mounts. And all of those accessories are going to stay in place with a 5/8 pin and clip. That is not included with the hitch, but many times when you're picking up accessories, they'll have them included. If you plan on leaving your accessories on the back of your Jeep, you might want to take a look at a locking pin and clip. It's a good deterrent for anyone walking by that sees your accessories to not just be able to take your stuff. If you plan on pulling trailers, the plate style safety chain loops have 2 open holes that allow you to get a standard S hook in place or even a larger clevis style. The metal's a little bit thick, so it's slightly difficult to get the S hook, not in place, but to get it to just kind of sit freely. But overall, it's still able to be hooked up pretty easily. And if you really wanted to, you could put some quick links on there. And if you're planning on pulling a trailer, you're going to want to adhere to the weight capacities of not only the hitch, but the vehicle and all the components that you'll be using. So check the vehicle's owner's manual, see what it's capable of, and compare that with the weight capacities of the hitch, which this one's pretty good. You have a gross trailer weight rating of 5,000 pounds, which is going to be the weight of the trailer plus the accessories loaded onto it. And your tongue weight is going to be the downward pressure on the inside of the receiver tube opening. That's going to account for a lot of your suspended accessories, so cargo carriers and bike racks kind of fall into that category. And with 500 pounds, that's pretty solid. You can get a 4-bike rack loaded up or a cargo carrier loaded up, and you should be able to fall into that capacity with no problem. You can also use a weight distribution hitch on here. It's not going to bump any of the numbers up, so you're going to stay with that 5,000 pounds and the 500 tongue weight. But overall, great capacities. But keep in mind again, check the vehicle's owner's manual and also the ball mount and ball that you'll be using. Take the lowest number so you stay safe. Jeeps are kind of unique in the fact that they still have a spare tire on the back. It adds to that off-road look, but you just don't see it that often with a lot of vehicles out on the road. And with that being said, a receiver sits about flush with the rear bumper, but you do need to account for the tire, especially with bike racks and cargo carriers that stow in a vertical position. You may be hard-pressed to get one to work without having a long shank on there. So there are adapters, but looking for an accessory that has a longer shank is going to be ideal. And the same goes for ball mounts, because from the center of our hitch pin hole to the furthest point on our tire, we're coming in about 7 inches. So when you get a ball mount, you're going to want one with a longer shank. It's going to extend that ball out and make it easier for you to hook up to the coupler and not have to worry about making contact with the tire. Now, if you're looking for a riser drop, and that way you can tow safely, ground clearance on this one comes in at 19.5 inches. So more than likely you're going to need a drop configuration to get a nice level setup, but the best way to find out what you need is get your trailer, get it nice and level, measure from the ground to the top of the coupler, take that number and then compare it with your 19.5 inches, and that's going to tell you the riser drop necessary. When it comes to the installation of this hitch, it's actually a pretty easy one to do. There's holes that are in the rear frame where we're going to be bolting the hitch up, and you will have potentially a spacer bracket that will need to come out of place, but it's fairly easy to get out, and then you're just simply going to put your hitch up, bolt it, tighten and torque, and you're ready to rock. So if you're a DIYer doing this yourself, I'll walk you through all the steps to make sure you get your hitch installed. But if you don't have the place to do it, the tools, the time, or even the want to do it, I still want you to have a hitch on your Jeep, because it really does add to what you can do with it. And so don't let that install hold you back from getting a hitch. You can reach out to one of our dealers through our dealer locator to find someone close to you to get that hitch installed. And also, once you get it installed, whether you do it yourself or have someone else do it, take some pictures of the finished product and how you're using it. We love to see neighbors out on adventures using our products and their different uses to help other neighbors like you figure out what they can do with their Jeep. With all that said, let's take a look at the installation and we'll get your hitch installed on your Jeep. To begin our installation, we're going to be right here on the rear beam where we're going to be bolting up our hitch. And more times than not, these will have factory bolts that go into the rail, and sometimes you use them, but that's not the case here today. There's also going to be a plate up front that's attached. It's just going to have weld nuts that those bolts go into. We're going to get that completely removed, and in order to do that, you're going to want an 18mm wrench. Those two factory bolts are going to be located just right behind the muffler, so we'll get these taken out. Now, depending on what kind of elements your vehicle has been in, these can get a little bit tricky, so if you need to, you can put some penetrating oil on those threads, and that'll kind of help loosen it up, but we'll get these removed. Most times these will pull out with no problem. They're a pretty long bolt. Occasionally you'll run into issues, depending on trim, with the muffler being in the way. If that is the case, you can just lower it down. There's going to be some exhaust isolators on each side of the muffler, and just using a pry bar and some soapy water, just pry those off, and that's going to allow the exhaust to drop down, and it's going to make it a lot easier to get that hardware out. But again, that's only certain trims. On this one, we're not having any issues. Now, the bracket with the weld nuts, that will need to come down, and it's attached where on the bottom side of the bumper you're going to see two 10mm bolts. They're going to be the wider ones, not the ones in the center. We're going to get this taken out, and that way we can get that plate taken out. Now from here, we should be able to shimmy this out. You may need to kind of work it at a few different angles here, but let's see if I can't come up with any tips for you. Now, you can remove these small 8mm if you need to, but I found to get this out, just kind of pry back that plastic a little, and once you get these tabs past that, you'll see it kind of sits up there like this, so that way we can just kind of pop that out. So you may have to force it a little bit, but with that out of the way, now we can start getting our hitch up. At this point, we're ready to get our hitch raised up, and we're just going to be aligning the holes on the hitch to the holes on the frame. And our hardware, I would have at least one bolt set up with the flat washer towards the head. We're going to pass it from the front towards the back, and having one of them in place will at least keep it up there to where we can get the rest of them passed in. So pretty simple here. Sometimes the muffler can get in the way, but more times than not, you should be able to just get a straight pass. If you have to, you might have to just kind of push the muffler down for a second, and that will allow you to get this passed in. Now, if you run into any bolts that don't completely pass through, they're catching a little resistance, you can move the hitch around, but if it's still binding up, sometimes tolerances in those holes from the factory aren't that great. And what you can do sometimes is get it passed through and just take a 3/4 inch wrench and start to thread it, and it should go through easily. If it's really bad, then you may have to kind of drill that hole out, but more times than not, that should clear it out enough to be able to get your holes to pass, or your bolts to pass through. Now, if you're not able to get that bolt to pass in because of the muffler, then you can pull down on it, but it's not wiggling very much for us. So our next option is to pry off the isolator. And generally, if you put a little bit of soapy water, it'll help lubricate that. And then with a pry bar or a flathead screwdriver, you're just going to wedge in here and pry that off. You can go to the top or bottom, whichever one's easier. Once you have your bolts passed through, we're going to grab our serrated flange nuts and get these started. Now, it can get pretty tight here. You might be able to get your fingers to get the threads started. And what I recommend doing is pull the bolt back a little bit to give you as much space as possible. Hold up that flange nut and then thread the bolt on the back side by the head. Now, as you kind of get further in, if these are giving you issues trying to feed those up with your finger, you can grab a box end of a wrench and just kind of hold that in place and just slide that up here. And as I mentioned, you can kind of pull that bolt back out a little bit. And then once you get it started, that should start threading on. We'll just continue by getting the rest of our nuts put in place. Now we're ready to snug down our hardware. We don't have to get too crazy here because we're going to come back with a torque wrench and properly torque them down, but this is going to save ourselves a little bit of wrenching. Now the holes are slotted. There's a little bit of side-to-side movement, So I'd recommend before snugging it down, get it as centered up as possible. And then when you go to tighten it down, 2 3/4-inch wrenches are a great way. You can just put, the wrench on the nut side and then the ratcheting side on the head, and then we'll just start tightening this down. Once you have everything snugged down, we'll come back with the torque wrench and a 3/4-inch socket, and you're going to refer to the instruction manual for the torque setting. We'll go through and torque these all down because at the end of the day, you may be towing a decent amount of weight. You want this to make sure that it's going to be tight enough for the lifespan of the hitch, but also not too tight, putting stress on any of the hardware. So our torque wrench is really going to be the ticket to getting that perfect number. And generally, I like to torque or use a torque wrench on the nut side. It's a better way to torque things, but we're just limited on space here, and trying to get a socket on that nut side is going to be really tough. So I'm going to be using the head of the bolt to torque down. And if you need a torque wrench, we have them available here at eTrailer. You can generally go to an auto parts store and rent one for free. And once you get all 4 of these torqued down, you've officially installed your hitch. Now all that's left to do is load up your accessories, put in your pin and clip, and hit the road. And if you're wondering about those 10mm bolts that we took out, not to worry, they're not going back up because the plate that we removed, that's where those threads were located, so we will not be putting that hardware back in. It's not going to cause any issue for the bumper. And that was a look at installation of the eTrailer trailer hitch receiver on a 2021 Jeep Wrangler 4xe.